The airport was alive with energy that morning. People hurried through the wide halls, some rolling their suitcases behind them, others balancing coffee cups as they tried to find their gates. Families gathered in small circles, business travelers tapped on laptops, and children pressed their faces against tall glass windows to watch planes take off. For two young sisters, it was more than just another day of travel. It was the beginning of something special, a trip they had been waiting for since the start of summer. The girls, ages 15 and 17, had grown up loving the idea of adventure. They were not first-time travelers. Their parents often encouraged them to see new places, meet different people, and understand the world outside their neighborhood. But this trip felt different. It was not just about flying from one city to another. It was about independence. For the first time, they were flying without their parents, and that brought a mix of excitement and nervousness. They arrived at the airport early, their backpacks bouncing lightly on their shoulders. The older sister held onto the tickets carefully, like they were golden passes to freedom. The younger one looked around, wide-eyed, trying to take in every detail: the flashing screens that listed flights, the announcements echoing overhead, the sight of pilots walking by in sharp uniforms. Everything seemed big, important, and just a little overwhelming. Their parents had dropped them off at the entrance with hugs and words of encouragement. Their mother had reminded them to stay together, not to lose sight of each other in the crowd. Their father had smiled, proud to see them growing into young women who could handle a journey on their own. They waved goodbye, the car pulling away, and the sisters stepped inside the terminal holding onto each other's confidence. They followed the signs, passed through security, and made their way toward their gate. The airport seemed like a world of its own, a world full of stories happening all at once. At one corner, a couple laughed as they shared a snack. At another, a soldier hugged his family tight before walking away. Everywhere they looked, there were signs of people heading somewhere important. The sisters felt like they were part of something much bigger than themselves. The older sister carried herself with quiet responsibility. She wanted her parents to know they could trust her. She checked the time often, made sure they had their IDs and boarding passes ready, and kept an eye on where they were supposed to go. The younger one, more playful, sometimes skipped a step or hummed softly as they walked, but she never strayed too far. She knew her sister was in charge, and she respected that. When they reached their gate, they settled into two seats near the window. The younger sister pressed her forehead against the glass, watching as luggage carts moved across the runway and workers guided planes into place. She whispered about how she couldn't wait to feel the plane lift off, that strange, thrilling moment when the ground disappears below you and the sky opens wide. The older sister smiled, half listening, half making sure she had everything under control. She looked at the ticket again and traced the letters of their names, proud that they were doing this on their own. Around them, other passengers began to gather. Some sat quietly, lost in their own thoughts. Others scrolled through phones or flipped through magazines. A family with a small child tried to keep him entertained with toys, while a group of college students laughed loudly over inside jokes. The sisters watched them all, realizing that everyone here had a reason for traveling, a story that led them to this very gate. As boarding time grew closer, the younger sister leaned back in her chair and whispered, "Can you believe this? We're really doing it." Her eyes sparkled with excitement, the kind that comes only when you're on the edge of something new. The older sister nodded, though inside she felt a mixture of pride and pressure. She wanted everything to go smoothly, wanted this trip to be remembered as a success. A voice on the loudspeaker announced the flight details, calling passengers to line up by group numbers. People began to rise from their seats, gathering their belongings and forming a line at the gate. The sisters stood too, their tickets held firmly in their hands. They felt a small rush of adrenaline, the kind that comes when you know you're moments away from taking off into the sky. They walked together toward the gate agent, their steps in sync, their faces glowing with anticipation. For them, this was not just about reaching their destination. It was about proving to themselves, and to everyone who loved them, that they were ready for responsibility. It was about stepping into a new chapter, one where they could be trusted to handle the world on their own. The line moved slowly, but the girls didn't mind. They talked quietly about the places they would see, the people they might meet, and the stories they would have to tell when they came back. They imagined what it would feel like to land, to step into a new city, and to explore it together without anyone guiding their every move. At that moment, they felt unstoppable. They were young, hopeful, and full of dreams. They believed the world was open to them, that all they had to do was walk forward and claim their place in it. What they didn't know was that the next few minutes would change the way they saw travel forever. The sisters moved forward in the line, their tickets held tightly in their hands. They could hear the steady beeps of the scanner each time a passenger stepped up to the counter. The sound gave them comfort. It meant people were moving closer to their seats, closer to the sky, closer to their destinations. The girls exchanged quick smiles, feeling the rush of excitement grow stronger with every step they took. When it was their turn, they approached the gate agent together. The older sister handed over the 2 tickets, standing tall with a sense of responsibility. She had been preparing for this moment, ready to show that she could handle the little details of travel. The younger sister stood at her side, rocking lightly on her feet, her eyes focused on the boarding tunnel that led to the plane. The agent glanced at the tickets, then at the girls, and paused. The usual quick scan, the cheerful nod, the enjoy your flight, none of it happened. Instead, the agent frowned slightly and looked back at the tickets again. The sisters waited quietly, thinking maybe it was just a routine check. But the pause stretched longer than expected, and with each passing second, their excitement began to soften into unease. "Where are your parents?" the agent finally asked, her tone polite but cautious. The older sister blinked, surprised by the question. "They dropped us off earlier," she answered. "It's just us flying today." The agent nodded slowly, but her eyes still studied them carefully. She looked down at the tickets again and then back at the sisters, as if trying to connect pieces of a puzzle. "And these are your seats?" she asked, pointing to the printed numbers. "Yes, ma'am," the older sister replied. Her voice was steady, but her heart started to beat a little faster. She wondered why there were so many questions for something that was supposed to be simple. The agent excused herself for a moment and spoke quietly with another employee behind the counter. The girls could not hear the words, only see the quick glances in their direction. Other passengers in line began to notice. Some leaned slightly to the side to see what was happening, while others shifted impatiently, waiting for the line to move again. The younger sister tugged gently at her sister's sleeve. "Is something wrong?" she whispered, her voice small. "I don't think so," the older one replied, though her own confidence was starting to shake. She held the younger girl's hand, trying to reassure her. The agent returned, her expression professional but firm. "We're going to need to check something before you can board," she said. "Please step aside for a moment." The word stung. Step aside. It sounded simple, but it carried a weight the girls didn't expect. They moved to the side of the gate counter, standing close together while the rest of the passengers continued to board. People passed them, some giving curious glances, others avoiding eye contact altogether. The sisters could feel the difference between themselves and everyone else. The older sister tried to stay calm. "Excuse me," she said softly to the agent, "is there a problem with our tickets?" The agent hesitated. "We just need to make sure everything is in order," she replied. Her tone was careful, but it gave no real explanation. The sisters waited. Minutes felt like hours. The boarding line grew shorter as more and more people walked through the tunnel toward the plane. The younger sister watched them go, her excitement fading into worry. She thought of their parents, who trusted them to handle this trip. What if they missed the flight? What if something went wrong? She looked at her sister, who stood stiff and quiet, trying to hold on to her composure. Inside, the older sister's thoughts were racing. She knew their tickets were valid. She knew their parents had arranged everything properly. So why were they being delayed? Why were they the only ones being questioned? As the plane filled, the waiting area around the gate grew emptier. The laughter of the college students faded down the tunnel, the chatter of the family with the little boy disappeared, and even the soldier they had seen earlier had already boarded. Soon, it felt like they were the only ones left. The agent returned again, this time with another staff member. The two spoke quietly, occasionally glancing at the sisters. Their words were hushed, but the tension was clear. The younger girl's stomach tightened, and she leaned closer to her sister. "Why don't they believe us?" she whispered. "I don't know," her sister replied, her voice firm but filled with a quiet frustration. She wanted to protect her little sister, to keep her from feeling afraid. But the truth was, she didn't understand it either. Finally, the agent came back and said, "We're just waiting for final confirmation. Please be patient." The older sister nodded politely, but inside she felt something heavy settle in her chest. She looked down at the tickets still in her hand, the same ones that had once felt like golden passes to freedom. Now they felt like paper barriers. The younger sister's eyes filled with unshed tears, not because she was in trouble, but because she felt unseen. They had done everything right, arrived early, checked in, gone through security, waited their turn. Yet here they were, standing apart, treated like they didn't belong. They tried to remain hopeful, reminding each other that maybe this was just a mistake, a small delay that would be cleared up soon. But deep inside, they both felt the sting of doubt. They couldn't understand why the rules seemed different for them. Around them, the gate area grew quiet. The plane was nearly full, and the tunnel stood open but waiting. The sisters clutched their bags and leaned into each other, their voices low as they wondered what might happen next. For the first time that day, the excitement of independence gave way to something else, a sense of powerlessness. They wanted so badly to step forward, to walk down that tunnel and take their seats like everyone else. But instead, they stood to the side, their joy paused, their hearts heavy with questions they could not answer. They had no way of knowing that the next few minutes would bring an unexpected turn, one that would leave everyone at the gate speechless. The minutes ticked by slowly, each one stretching longer than the last. The two sisters stood together near the gate counter, holding their tickets that now felt heavier than the bags on their shoulders. Around them, the airport noise carried on announcements over the loudspeakers, the hum of rolling suitcases, the chatter of other travelers rushing toward their own gates. But for the sisters, everything felt quiet. Not the quiet of peace, but the quiet of being stuck, unseen, and unsure. The younger sister shifted her weight from one foot to the other. She looked up at her older sister, hoping for answers, but there were none to give. The older sister kept her face calm, her chin raised just slightly, trying to appear confident even though inside she was full of questions. They had been told to wait. That was all. No explanation, no clear reason, just instructions to stand aside until someone could verify their situation. The word echoed in their minds, verify. It was such a small word, but it carried so much meaning. Why did they need to be verified when everyone else had been waved through with a simple scan and a nod? Passengers who had been in line with them earlier were now gone, safely boarded, buckled into their seats, maybe already leaning their heads against the windows to rest. The sisters were still here, watching the boarding door stand like a wall between them and the world they had hoped to enter. The silence between them began to feel heavy. The younger sister fiddled with the zipper of her backpack. Maybe they lost our names in the computer," she said softly, trying to find a simple explanation. "Maybe," the older sister replied, though she didn't believe it. She kept glancing at the gate agents who whispered to one another, never including the sisters in the conversation. The older sister wanted to step forward, to demand an answer, but something held her back. She didn't want to cause trouble. She didn't want to make things worse. So, they waited. The younger sister sat down in one of the empty seats nearby, her legs suddenly tired from standing. She hugged her backpack to her chest and leaned against it like it was a shield. She looked out the window at the plane waiting on the runway. Its silver body gleamed in the sunlight, the engines quiet but ready. She imagined herself inside, buckled into a seat, holding a cup of juice, laughing with her sister about the view from above the clouds. But here she was, stuck in the gate area, not knowing if she would ever get on. The older sister remained standing, her eyes fixed on the staff behind the counter. Every time one of them glanced their way, her stomach tightened. She could feel people walking past, their footsteps echoing on the shiny floor, some sneaking quick looks of curiosity. Being watched in that way, not with warmth, but with questions in their eyes, made her feel small. The silence was not truly silent. It was filled with thoughts that neither sister spoke aloud. Thoughts like, why us? Did we do something wrong? Do we not belong here? The younger sister kept these questions to herself, afraid of sounding weak. The older sister buried them deep, trying to stand as a wall of strength. But the questions were there all the same, echoing louder than the busy noise of the airport. The clock above the gate ticked steadily. The flight time was drawing close. The boarding area, once filled with people and laughter, was nearly empty now. A few stragglers rushed by to catch their flights, but the sisters stayed rooted in place. Every second that passed felt like sand slipping away, taking their hopes of being on that plane with it. The younger sister finally whispered, "Do you think we're going to miss it?" The older one didn't answer right away. She wanted to say no, wanted to promise her sister that everything would be fine, but the words caught in her throat. She took a deep breath before answering. "We won't miss it," she said firmly, even though her heart trembled with uncertainty. The younger sister nodded, trying to believe it, but the silence pressed back harder. She thought of their parents, who had trusted them with this trip. She pictured her mother's proud smile at the drop-off, her father's encouraging words. What would they think if they knew their daughters were sitting here, unable to board a flight they had every right to be on? The older sister thought about it too. She imagined calling her parents to explain, and she hated the idea of their disappointment. They had wanted this to be a lesson in independence, a chance to prove responsibility. Instead, it felt like a lesson in patience, in waiting for answers that never seemed to come. The gate agents moved about, checking lists, typing into computers, but no one came to speak to the girls directly. It was as if they had been put on pause, their story frozen while everyone else's kept moving forward. The younger sister leaned closer to her sibling. "I don't like this," she whispered. Her voice cracked just a little, and she quickly wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, not wanting to cry in public. "I know," the older sister said softly. She placed a hand on her sister's shoulder. "We'll be okay." The words were gentle, meant to comfort, but even she felt how thin they were. The silence stretched on, wrapping around them like an invisible wall. People hurried through the terminal, announcements echoed overhead, but none of it touched the sisters. They were in their own bubble, waiting, wondering, wishing for someone to simply let them through. And yet, within that silence, something was building. A feeling they couldn't name at the time. A lesson, maybe, about patience, about strength, about the quiet ways the world can test you. They didn't know it yet, but this moment of painful waiting was about to be interrupted in the most surprising way. A way that would not only end their silence but also leave everyone in the gate area. The sisters were still waiting, their tickets clutched tightly, when something shifted in the atmosphere around the gate. The noise of the airport carried on as usual, rolling suitcases, hurried footsteps, announcements echoing over speakers, but near the boarding counter, there was a new energy, almost like a current moving through the room. The younger sister sat quietly, hugging her backpack, her chin resting on her knees. She felt tired from waiting and worried that the plane might leave without them. The older sister stood close by, her arms folded across her chest, watching the gate agents carefully. She had stopped checking the clock. Each tick only deepened her frustration, and she didn't want her sister to see the worry on her face. Then, just as the sisters were beginning to lose hope, a tall man in a crisp suit walked briskly toward the gate. He carried himself with quiet authority, the kind of presence that made people step aside without being asked. His shoes clicked firmly on the floor, and his eyes scanned the counter with sharp focus. The gate agents straightened almost immediately when they saw him approach. Their voices lowered, their posture changed. It was clear he wasn't just another traveler. The man stopped at the counter and spoke calmly to the employees. "What seems to be the issue here?" His voice was steady, not loud, but it carried the weight of expectation. The sisters turned their heads, curious. The older one felt her heart jump slightly. Maybe, just maybe, this person could help. One of the gate agents explained quietly, mentioning the sisters, pointing in their direction. The man's eyes followed the gesture, landing on the two girls. For a moment, his face softened. He looked at them not with suspicion or doubt, but with warmth and recognition. The younger sister sat up straighter, surprised by the way he looked at them. It wasn't the look of someone trying to question them. It was the look of someone who knew them. The man walked away from the counter and over to where the sisters sat. His footsteps were calm but purposeful. He stopped just in front of them, and a gentle smile spread across his face. "Are you two doing all right?" he asked kindly. The older sister blinked, unsure how to respond. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, caught off guard by his directness. The younger one nodded slightly, though her eyes were wide with confusion. He glanced at the tickets in their hands and then back at the gate agents. "There seems to be a mistake here," he said firmly. "These young ladies should have been on that plane already." The agents looked uneasy. One of them cleared her throat and tried to explain, but the man raised his hand lightly, cutting her off without anger, only with certainty. He turned back to the sisters. "They're my daughters," he said simply. The words hung in the air, echoing louder than the announcements overhead. The gate agents froze. The sisters froze too, their eyes widening in shock. Everyone nearby, a few late passengers, a couple sitting in the waiting area, turned their heads, stunned by what they had just heard. The younger sister gasped quietly, her hands tightening around her backpack. The older one felt her chest tighten, not from fear this time, but from the overwhelming realization of what had just happened. The man standing before them wasn't just a traveler. He was the CEO of the airline. The agents' faces shifted quickly from authority to embarrassment. Their confident expressions melted into nervous ones as they processed the situation. The man they worked for, the highest leader of their company, was standing there, defending the very girls they had delayed. The older sister tried to find her voice. You're the CEO," she asked softly, hardly believing it. He nodded gently, his smile warm. "Yes. And you are my daughters." He said it again, not as a legal fact, but as a statement of care and protection. It was his way of telling the room and the girls themselves that they belonged, that they were worthy of respect, and that no one had the right to question their place. The younger sister's eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't tears of fear. They were tears of relief. After all the waiting, all the silence, someone had finally spoken for them. Someone powerful, someone respected, had stepped in and claimed them with words that carried both love and authority. The gate agents stumbled over apologies. "We didn't realize we thought," but their excuses sounded weak against the simplicity of the man's declaration. He didn't raise his voice, didn't show anger. Instead, he looked directly at them and said, Every passenger deserves the same respect, no matter who they are. These young ladies had valid tickets, and they were treated unfairly. That should never happen in this company. Not to them, not to anyone. The silence that followed was thick, but this time it was a different kind of silence. It wasn't painful or heavy like before. It was powerful. It was the silence that comes when truth has been spoken and no one can deny it. The older sister felt her throat tighten, and for the first time that day, she didn't feel small. She felt seen. She looked at the man, this stranger who suddenly wasn't a stranger, and whispered, "Thank you." He smiled at her kindly. "You don't need to thank me. You deserve to be treated with dignity. Always remember that." The younger sister clutched her sister's hand tightly, her heart pounding but full of relief. She couldn't stop replaying his words in her head, "They're my daughters." The man gestured toward the gate. "Now, let's get you on that plane." The staff moved quickly, scanning their tickets without hesitation. The sisters stepped forward, side by side, their heads held a little higher. They walked down the boarding tunnel, but this time it felt different. They weren't walking into the unknown with fear. They were walking with the memory of someone powerful who had reminded them of their worth. As they stepped onto the plane, the younger sister leaned close to her sibling and whispered, "Did that really just happen?" The older one smiled faintly, her eyes still wide. "Yes. And I'll never forget it." Behind them, the CEO watched quietly until they disappeared into the tunnel. Then he turned back to the staff, his expression steady. "Remember this moment," he told them softly. "Because how we treat people is more important than anything else." And with that, he walked away, leaving the entire gate area in a hush that no one would forget. The airplane door closed with a soft thud, sealing the sisters inside at last. They walked down the narrow aisle, their tickets in hand, the hum of the engines vibrating softly beneath their feet. The younger sister glanced around at the rows of passengers already buckled in. Some were reading, some were adjusting their bags in the overhead bins, and some were simply resting with their eyes closed. For everyone else, this flight was ordinary. For the two sisters, it felt like victory. They slid into their seats side by side, the younger one by the window, the older one on the aisle. As the plane began to roll back from the gate, the younger sister pressed her forehead against the cool glass. She could see the terminal growing smaller as the plane prepared to taxi to the runway. Somewhere inside that building, the man in the suit, the CEO, had spoken words that changed everything. "They're my daughters." She whispered it softly under her breath, almost like a song. Her sister turned to look at her, then gave a small smile. The words echoed in both of their hearts, steady and unforgettable. The older sister leaned back in her seat, finally letting herself relax. The weight she had been carrying since the moment they were told to step aside seemed lighter now. She looked at her little sister and said quietly, "We made it." The younger one nodded eagerly. "Yes, we did." "But," she hesitated, her brow furrowing. "I don't understand. Why did it have to happen like that? Why did we have to wait so long before someone believed us?" The older sister sighed, glancing down at her hands. "I don't know," she admitted. "But I do know one thing: I'll never forget how it felt when he stood up for us." The younger one thought about it too. She imagined the faces of the gate agents when the CEO spoke, the way the entire room seemed to fall silent. It was like a curtain had been pulled back, and the truth had filled the air. She smiled faintly. He didn't even raise his voice. He just said it, and everyone listened. The older sister nodded. "That's because some voices carry more than sound. They carry respect. And when someone uses that kind of voice to protect you, it feels powerful." The plane began to speed down the runway, the engines roaring louder and louder. The girls held onto their armrests as the ground dropped away beneath them. The younger sister laughed nervously, her excitement returning, while the older one let out a long breath of relief. For a moment, the tension of the morning melted into the thrill of flying. The clouds rose to meet them, white and soft, and the sky opened wide like a promise. But even as the beauty of the flight captured their eyes, the memory of what had just happened stayed close to their hearts. Hours later, when the plane landed and they stepped out into a new city, the sisters felt different. They had started the day as ordinary travelers. They ended it as witnesses to a moment that carried meaning far beyond a single flight. In the days that followed, they told the story to their parents. At first, their mother and father were shocked and upset to hear how their daughters had been delayed at the gate. But when the girls reached the part about the CEO, their father's eyes widened. "He said that?" he asked slowly. "Yes," the older sister replied. "Right in front of everyone. He looked at us and said, 'They're my daughters.'" Their mother pressed her hand over her heart, her voice soft. "Do you know what that means? It means he saw you. Not as passengers, not as strangers, but as people worth defending. That's something you'll carry with you for the rest of your lives." The sisters nodded, and deep down, they knew it was true. The memory of that day wasn't just about embarrassment or waiting. It was about the moment when someone stepped into their silence and gave them a voice. The lesson grew with them as the years passed. Whenever the younger sister faced a challenge, a time when people doubted her, or when she felt overlooked, she remembered that moment at the gate. She remembered the calm strength in the man's voice and repeated his words silently to herself, "They're my daughters." It reminded her that she was worthy of respect, that she belonged in every room she entered. The older sister carried it too. As she grew into adulthood, she often thought about responsibility, leadership, and fairness. She remembered the way the CEO had handled the situation: no shouting, no anger, just firm truth. She realized that leadership was not only about managing people or making big decisions. True leadership was about protecting those who couldn't protect themselves, about using your position to make others feel safe and valued. Back at the airline, the story didn't fade away either. The staff who had been at the gate that day spoke about it quietly among themselves. Some were embarrassed by how they had handled the situation, but many admitted it opened their eyes. They saw how easy it was to make assumptions, how damaging it could be to treat someone differently without realizing it. For weeks afterward, managers reminded their teams, every passenger deserves respect. You don't know their story. You don't know who they might be connected to. But even if you never find out, treat them with kindness. Always. The CEO himself rarely spoke about the event, but those who worked close to him said it changed the way he looked at his own company. He became even more committed to fairness, to training staff in empathy, and to reminding everyone that airlines weren't just about airplanes and schedules. They were about people, each passenger with a dream, a destination, a reason to fly. And as for the sisters, the story became part of their family history. They shared it at family gatherings, telling cousins, aunts, and uncles about the day they were almost left behind and the man who stopped it with a single sentence. Each time the story was told, someone in the room would shake their head in disbelief, someone else would smile with pride, and the younger sister would repeat the words softly, like a mantra, "They're my daughters." Years later, when the sisters were grown, they often reflected on how such a simple sentence had changed their view of the world. They realized that dignity wasn't something that had to be earned, it was something every human being deserved, no matter their age, background, or appearance. The painful silence at the gate had tested them, but the unexpected intervention had taught them a truth they carried into every part of their lives: respect is not about who you are on paper, or what title you hold. It is about recognizing the humanity in each person you meet. That day at the airport became more than just a memory. It became a lesson, one they would remember, one they would pass down, and one they would live by forever.